Alright guys, back with another requested comparison. Today we have the S10e versus the LG V60. So I would have never had thought to do this comparison because these are kind of different phones for different type of people, but I will break it down if you are choosing between these two devices. So the V60 is going for $400 and I'll have those links down below. S10e you can actually find for around $300 and under now, so it's very cheap. And just starting off with the hardware, you can see the big difference so far is just the massive size difference here on the S10e. You can actually, you can actually fit the S10e inside of the V60's display. So just to give you an idea of how, compact it is. So pretty much off the bat for hardware, you're choosing between a more compact setup versus a just a big massive phone setup. So that is something you have to choose from. Obviously if you have smaller hands on the S10e, it's going to be easier to reach and stuff like that, the corners of the display and all that, so it's not going to be as strenuous on the hands. As far as hardware, they're both glass and metal phones. On the S10e, volume rockers, your Bixby button, and then we have our fingerprint scanner, which also acts as a power button, which is also very fast, as you can see. Boom. The V60's is, it has an in-display one. Definitely not as fast as a physical one, but it's definitely accurate. But also on the S10e, you do have face unlock. And then down below, we have headphone jack, USB-C, stereo speakers on the S10e. The V60 also IP68 dust and water resistant, glass and metal, built like a tank, power button, volume rockers, your Google Assistant button, 3.5mm headphone jack with a quad DAC, so you're going to get way better audio experience than you are going to get on the S10e. And then we have USB Type-C, and then of course stereo speakers as well. So for hardware, they're both pretty much very solid feeling devices. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about image quality or display quality. So on the S10e, you have a more compact display. It's a dynamic AMOLED display. It's HDR10 Plus at 5.8 inches. You have the punch hole on the right hand side, 1080p 438 for the resolution and PPI. And on the V60, you have a massive display at 6.8 inches. It's also a POLED display, HDR10 Plus as well, 1080p 395 for the PPI. As far as display quality, they both pretty much look great for these 1080p panels here. Color wise, everything just looks really great on both of these phones. I do prefer I guess the S10e's punch hole, which is not a super small punch hole, but it is a punch hole nonetheless. And you do have a notch on the V60, and I think you do have a little bit of more bezel on the V60 as well. But overall, as display quality, they're very similar. They both do not have any type of high refresh rate or anything like that. So they both look really good, fairly bright outdoors. And again, I think as far as display quality, you're not really picking from anything besides this is a small display and this is a bigger display. And on the V60, you are capable of having a dual display setup on here. So if I wanted to put the dual display case on, I would pretty much have two displays on the V60. So that is also one thing to consider as well. But as far as display quality, I think they're pretty well matched, besides the size of each display. So let's talk about the specs a little bit more. On the V60, we have the Snapdragon 865, and we also have the Adreno 650 GPU, micro SD support, 128 gigs of internal storage, and 8 gigs of RAM. On the S10e, we have the Snapdragon 855, so a generation behind or an older chip, with the Adreno 640. Also have micro SD support, 128 gigs of internal storage, and 6 gigs of RAM. Now there is a 256 and 8 gigabyte of RAM option on the S10e as well, so do note that. So as far as speed wise, if we pull up the Geekbench scores, obviously the V60 is going to be faster. It's got a newer chipset, and we'll go ahead and get into the real world test. But as you can see here are your Geekbench scores, so you can get an idea of the speed as far as the Geekbench test goes. But if we go ahead and open applications, I don't think one is really that much faster over the other, to be honest. As far as opening applications and just getting into apps and stuff like that, they both do a really good job of just bouncing in and out of applications without lagging. But as you can see, the V60 is obviously going to be a little bit faster. Maybe we'll get a noticeable speed increase with the game. Yeah, so it's really not that big of a difference, guys, as far as, you know, the 865 versus the 855. Maybe over the long term we'll see you know, significant improvement. As you can see, it's not anything that I think is super noticeable. So you can see that. Let's try one more. Let's try YouTube. Yeah, so they're pretty much, you know, tied with each other, honestly. All right, so here are your settings in PUBG. As you can see, on the S10e, we do have extreme FPS all the way, and then we can also opt in for Ultra HD, and it's pretty much the same settings on the V60 as well. We can max up to Ultra HD. So again, as far as gaming experience, I haven't had an actual issue with playing games on both of these phones. They both play they both play games really well. And you know, the V60 does have a slight advantage, I think, as a gaming device, because the battery is bigger. So if that's something you're really trying to do, I think the V60 would be more geared towards that, because you just, you know, have a bigger battery. It's always nice to be able to game and not have to charge constantly. And then you have still a great experience as far as graphics and, you know, FPS on the S10e, and you also have a more, to me, comfortable experience. Sometimes I like to game on smaller screens as well, but again, it all comes down to personal preference. And honestly, you do have the dual screen for the V60 if you wanted to use that with a compatible game or something like that. So you do have you know, quite a bit of advantage when it comes to gaming on the V60 with that case. Alright, so just talking about the cameras real quick. So on the S10e, you do have a 12 megapixel standard and a 16 megapixel ultra wide. You also have 4K video at 60 frames per second, and then you have a 10 megapixel selfie camera at 4K video, 30 or 60 FPS for that, which is really nice. I think the S10e still takes great photos. So if you are choosing between photos with these two, they both still take really good photos. I think the S10e, my only issue was that sometimes you can get a little bit of oversaturation sometimes, which is not a huge deal because it's that Samsung image processing. So the V60 has a more natural kind of image processing. But overall detail is good. The selfie camera is great. Skin tones are good. The ultra wide takes really good photos. So overall, you know, I was still impressed with the S10e's cameras. So on the V60, you do have slightly, you know, impressive specs. So the V60, you do get a 64 megapixel camera and then a 13 megapixel ultra wide. You also get a 0.3 depth sensor with 8K video, and you also get a 10 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K. And so overall, the V60 also does take really good photos as far as you know, color accuracy was really great on here. Detail was pretty solid on here as well. And the ultra wide was fine. You get a good depth of field on here as well, so a good blur. Selfie camera is actually pretty good on here, and video is pretty solid. And the mics are really good on the V60 as well. So you get two really solid cameras with both of these phones. All right, so let's go ahead and check out the speaker quality, starting with the S10e max volume. So of course, you know, as expected, the V60 is going to have a more fuller and a slightly louder sound, but it's actually closer than you think. So I don't know if you guys can hear that, but the S10e does have really good speakers, especially for its size, and also the way Samsung mixed it with, I believe, AKG. The sound is just really crisp and clear as far as like mids and highs. So excellent speakers, but you know, of course, the V60 is going to beat it out here. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about battery life, because this is, you know, a pretty big deal here. So On the S10e, you have a 3,100 milliamp battery with fast charging and also wireless charging at 15 watts with reverse wireless charging. So if I actually want to charge my V60 here, as you can see, I can do that on the S10e, which is pretty cool. See if I got it. There you go. So that's always a cool feature to have. And the S10e also has like the desktop mode on here as well, which is pretty cool. But you know, as far as battery life, you're not gonna get that good of battery on the S10e compared to the V60. The V60 has a massive 5,000 milliamp battery. You also have wireless charging on here as well. There's no reverse or wireless charging like you can do on the S10e. But yeah, battery life is just, it's a bigger battery and it's gonna last you all day, no problem, well into 2 days of battery life for the V60. So it does win in that department pretty easily. So if you need a phone that's really good on battery life, the V60 is definitely a great option. So I think that pretty much wraps this comparison up. Be sure to let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.